Imagine the feeling of welcoming something sacred into your home, a presence so profound that it fills every corner with peace and reverence. This was the unexpected invitation that Obed-Edom received when he opened the doors of his home to the Ark of the Covenant, the very symbol of God's presence. In a simple act of faith, he and his family became guardians of this divine presence, and their lives were forever transformed. Obed-Edom's story shows us that God doesn't seek perfection, but open hearts willing to welcome him, no matter the circumstances. In this message, we'll walk alongside Obed-Edom and discover the lessons of courage, trust, and legacy that he left us. We'll explore how God's presence brought unexpected and lasting blessings to his family and community. And as we learn from his example, we'll see that this isn't just an ancient story, but a living invitation for each of us, a call to open our hearts and experience the peace and transformation that only God's presence can bring. The Ark of the Covenant had a journey filled with awe, reverence, and at times a deep fear. This sacred chest, symbolizing God's presence among his people, wasn't just a mere artifact. It carried a promise of power and protection, but only when approached with a pure heart. After Israel's defeat and its time in Philistine captivity, the Ark's return journey to Israel was marked by great rejoicing, but also a stark reminder of its holiness. Uzzah's untimely death when he reached out to steady the Ark was a sobering moment for King David and all present, showing that God's holiness demanded respect beyond even the best intentions. With fear in his heart, David hesitated to take the Ark directly to Jerusalem. He wanted it in his city, near his palace, but the recent tragedy weighed on him. As he considered the Ark's next resting place, Obed-Edom's home came to mind. The decision to leave it there may have seemed practical at first, a temporary measure. But God, in his divine plan, was about to bless this seemingly modest family beyond measure. Sometimes God's blessings find us in the simplest places, like a humble home at the edge of town, rather than the grandest halls. Imagine Obed-Edom standing by his doorway, hearing that the Ark, the very symbol of God's presence, was about to come to his home. It was an invitation not everyone would dare accept. Some might see it as a risk, given what had happened to Uzzah, but Obed-Edom was a man of faith, and perhaps in his heart, he understood the honor in welcoming God's presence, even if it came with uncertainty. How often do we too face choices that challenge our comfort? Sometimes it's about opening the door to possibilities that others might shy away from. The day the Ark arrived at Obed-Edom's home must have been unforgettable. As the Levites carefully set it down, a sense of reverence filled the air, maybe mixed with a bit of fear. This wasn't just any visitor, it was the Lord's presence, right there in his household. What would you do if such a presence entered your home? Would you worry, or would you feel peace, knowing that God was with you in a profound way? As Obed-Edom's family adjusted to the Ark in their home, life took on a new rhythm. Each day became a reminder of God's closeness. In their small dwelling, they found themselves carrying the weight and blessing of something beyond human measure. Their story reminds us that, like Obed-Edom, our greatest encounters with God often happen right where we are, without needing to be in a palace or a temple. Just as God chose Obed-Edom's home, he chooses each of us for his purpose. And sometimes his presence comes when we least expect it, in places we might feel are unworthy. Obed-Edom's willingness to accept the Ark shows us that God's blessings come to those with open hearts and a welcoming spirit, even in times of fear. Obed-Edom wasn't a man of fame or riches. He was a humble Levite, a servant by lineage and calling, living a quiet life devoted to God and his family. In the lineage of Israel, the Levites held a unique role, carrying the honor and responsibility of serving God in the temple and in sacred duties. Obed-Edom's life, simple as it may have seemed, was shaped by his faith and his connection to a greater purpose. In a world where people often seek recognition and titles, he reminds us that greatness isn't always in position or power, but in the willingness to serve. When the ark was brought to his doorstep, it wasn't because of his social standing or wealth. It was his character and heart that made him a fitting choice to welcome the ark. God often sees beyond what others see, choosing individuals whose hearts are open and faithful. Isn't it encouraging to know that God's blessings aren't limited to those with outward success? Instead, he looks at each of us through a lens of love and purpose, ready to use us just as we are. Obed-Edom's choice to accept the ark into his home was a leap of faith. He knew the story of Uzzah and he understood the risks, but he trusted in God's protection and chose to open his doors. This moment paints a beautiful picture of how faith can sometimes ask us to go beyond our fears and to believe that God's presence is greater than our worries. When we're called to make bold choices, do we let fear hold us back? Or do we step forward with faith like Obed-Edom? Though the Bible doesn't tell us much about Obed-Edom's everyday life, we can imagine him as a man who lived by simple values, valuing his family, his faith, and his work. His home was probably modest, but filled with warmth and reverence for God. For someone like him, welcoming the ark meant more than just housing a sacred object. It was embracing God's presence in the midst of his daily life. Can you imagine opening your own home to such a responsibility? It's a reminder that in our own lives, we too are called to make room for God, even if we feel unworthy. Obed-Edom's story teaches us that faith isn't about having everything figured out or having perfect circumstances. It's about saying yes to God's calling, even in the face of the unknown. His willingness to embrace the ark shows that an open heart can lead to unimaginable blessings. Sometimes it's in these quiet, unseen acts of faith that God's glory shines the brightest, as it did in Obed-Edom's home. As we continue, Obed-Edom's journey will reveal the blessings that followed his act of faith, but his story begins with a heart that was simply open to God. Like Obed-Edom, we too have opportunities to welcome God's presence and let him transform our lives in ways we never expected. When Obed-Edom opened his home to the ark, it wasn't just an act of obedience, it was an act of courage. Welcoming the ark meant accepting the presence of God in a very tangible way. Imagine the atmosphere in his household as the ark rested there, a mixture of reverence, awe, and perhaps even a bit of anxiety. It's not every day that someone has the opportunity to host something so sacred, so powerful. Yet Obed-Edom didn't let fear control his decision. He chose faith over worry, and that choice set a foundation for the blessings that would follow. Obed-Edom's family likely felt the impact of his decision. His children, his wife, everyone under his roof experienced a shift in their daily lives. What once was an ordinary home now became a sacred space. And just as his home transformed, each family member began to witness and feel God's presence in a new way. In life, we all have moments where our faith and courage can change the lives of those around us. Obed-Edom's family serves as a reminder that sometimes our acts of faith create ripples that touch everyone in our circle. The courage Obed-Edom showed is something we all need at times. When life presents us with the unknown, with paths that seem uncertain, courage is the bridge between hesitation and hope. Obed-Edom didn't know what might happen with the ark under his roof, but he trusted in God's protection and care. We too face moments when we are called to open doors, both literally and figuratively, to what God has planned. What doors in your life might God be asking you to open with courage and faith? Obed-Edom's household didn't just accept the ark as a sacred object, they accepted it as a symbol of God's presence and protection. This small yet profound decision to welcome the ark led to blessings that extended to every corner of their lives. It's a powerful reminder that when we welcome God wholeheartedly, His blessings aren't just individual, they overflow into our families, our homes, and our communities. As the ark rested in Obed-Edom's home, there must have been a new rhythm, a peaceful assurance that God's presence brings. It didn't mean life would be perfect or without challenges, but it did mean that they could trust God's provision. knowing that his hand was over them. This is the beauty of a life centered around faith and courage. It brings a steadying peace that the world can't provide, a security that's rooted not in what we have, but in who God is. If this message has touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Maybe you too have opened a door in faith and witnessed God's blessings unfold. Or if you'd like, comment the word faith to let us know that you're walking this journey with us. And of course, subscribe to the channel to stay connected with us as we share more stories of courage, faith, and transformation. As the Ark of the Covenant rested in Obed-Edom's home, God's blessings poured out abundantly over him and his family. This wasn't a small blessing or a single moment of favor. It was as though God's presence brought an overflow of goodness that touched every aspect of their lives. For 3 months, Obed-Edom's household experienced a divine favor that was evident to all around them. The Bible doesn't specify each blessing, but we know that God's blessings are often felt in ways that go beyond words, bringing peace, joy, health, and provision that only His hand can provide. Imagine the people in the village seeing the changes in Obed-Edom's family. Perhaps they noticed his children growing stronger, his crops thriving, or a certain lightness in their spirits. God's blessings have a way of radiating outward, making even ordinary days feel extraordinary. And isn't it just like God to turn simple, everyday things into sources of joy and abundance? When we invite Him into our homes, He often blesses us in ways we never anticipated, filling our lives with His goodness. The blessings didn't stop at material gains or visible changes. Obed-Edom's household must have felt a profound sense of peace and assurance. There's a quiet confidence that comes when we know that God's presence is with us, a reminder that no matter the struggles, His love and protection are near. These blessings were a reflection of God's faithfulness, a sign that He delights in caring for those who welcome Him. How often do we pause to recognize the ways God is blessing us, even in the smallest of ways? This season of blessing was a result of Obed-Edom's faith and willingness to embrace God's presence fully. It shows us that sometimes the blessings we seek are simply waiting for an open door and a welcoming heart. In our lives too, the decision to let God into our hearts, our homes, and our families can lead to blessings that surpass our expectations. God's favor is not confined to ancient stories. It's available to each of us today. For Obed-Edom, the blessings likely became a testimony to everyone around him, a visible sign of God's love and grace. His neighbors and community would have seen that welcoming God brings favor, not fear, and that His blessings are meant to be shared, shining as a light for others to see. When God blesses us, He often uses those blessings to inspire and encourage those around us, reminding us that we are all part of His larger story. As we move forward in Obed-Edom's story, we see that his blessings were not the end of his journey, but the beginning. Like him, we are invited to live with open hearts, ready to receive God's grace and to share it with others. And sometimes, God's blessings overflow not just for our own joy, but as a way to draw others closer to Him, spreading His love in the most beautiful ways. As the ark rested in Obed-Edom's home, the blessings didn't just touch the household superficially, they transformed his family from within. It was as if each member felt a personal encounter with God's presence, leaving their hearts changed and their spirits uplifted. This transformation went beyond material blessings, reaching into the depths of their faith and character. Sometimes God's favor works quietly, changing who we are rather than just what we have. Obed-Edom's family became a testament to this kind of inner transformation, a living example of how God's love can reshape our lives. Each day with the ark brought a deeper sense of reverence and gratitude in their hearts. Obed-Edom and his family began to see life with new eyes, recognizing God's hand in even the smallest details. Perhaps they found more joy in each other's presence, more patience in challenges, and more gratitude in the daily routines. It's often the case that when we allow God into our hearts, our perspective shifts and we start to see His love in places we never noticed before. Do you find moments in your own life where God's presence brings you peace, even without words? This transformation in Obed-Edom's family wasn't just for them to keep. Others noticed, and the news spread of how God had blessed this humble household. Their testimony became a beacon of hope, a reminder that God's favor can find anyone, anywhere, as long as the heart is willing. Sometimes our own blessings inspire others, showing them what is possible with faith. Obed-Edom's family became a light, a symbol that God's favor is real and reachable for those who welcome Him. In times of uncertainty, having God's presence in their home must have brought a profound assurance that they were cared for. God didn't only bless them for the moment, He prepared them for the future, strengthening their faith and fortifying their spirits. This inner transformation is the true essence of faith, growing stronger in trust, even when the path ahead is unknown. How beautiful it is to know that God's blessings aren't just temporary, but meant to equip us for a life of purpose. Obed-Edom's family learned that favor with God isn't just about receiving, it's about being transformed so we can in turn bless others. Their lives began to reflect God's goodness to everyone around them, showing how a heart touched by God can touch the world. It's a reminder that when God blesses us, it often opens doors for us to become a blessing to others, carrying His light forward in love and faith. As we look ahead, we'll see that the impact of these blessings wasn't just for Obed-Edom's family in that moment, but for generations to come. Their lives were forever changed, and their faith became the foundation of a legacy that would honor God for years to follow. And so we too can look at our lives and ask, how is God shaping our faith today to create blessings for tomorrow? The day finally came when King David arrived to take the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. For Obed-Edom and his family, it was a bittersweet moment. The Ark had brought such profound blessings into their home, filling their lives with God's presence in a way they had never known before. Now they faced the reality of letting go. How often do we face moments when something we cherish must move on, leaving us with memories, blessings, and perhaps a tinge of longing? Obed-Edom could have been saddened, perhaps even disappointed. After all, his home had been transformed by God's presence, and the blessings had overflowed in every corner of his life. But instead of clinging to what was leaving, Obed-Edom trusted that God's favor would remain with them, even as the ark departed. It takes a deep, mature faith to let go of something good and believe that God's hand will still guide and bless us in the next season. This moment of farewell wasn't just about losing the ark, it was about trusting God with the unknown. Obed-Edom had learned that true faith doesn't depend on having visible reminders or special circumstances. Faith is about believing that God's presence goes with us, whether or not we feel it in tangible ways. How comforting it is to know that God's love doesn't leave when certain blessings move on. His faithfulness is constant, even in change. As Obed-Edom watched the ark leave, he knew that the blessings they had experienced were not solely because of the object itself, but because of the God who had chosen to bless them. In our lives too, we often find that blessings come through people, experiences, or seasons that, in time, must change. Yet the same God who blessed us then is still with us, ready to lead us into new blessings and opportunities for growth. In saying goodbye to the ark, Obed-Edom's family held on to something even greater, a faith that was rooted deeply in God's character, not just in His gifts. They had experienced the richness of His love and the security of His care, and that would remain with them. Their story reminds us that sometimes what we need most isn't the blessing itself, but the strength and faith it leaves behind, empowering us to face the future with trust. As we move forward in Obed-Edom's story, we'll see that his faith didn't waver. His heart remained committed to God, and he continued to serve faithfully even without the ark in his home. In our own lives, we can be inspired by his example, to embrace each blessing, to let go when needed, and to walk forward, trusting that God's goodness is never confined to one season. When the ark left his home, Obed-Edom could have chosen to return to his former life, grateful for the blessings, but moving on. Yet, he chose something different. He decided to follow the ark to Jerusalem and serve in the temple. This wasn't a requirement for him, but a response of love and devotion. For Obed-Edom, it wasn't just about the blessings the ark had brought. His heart was drawn closer to God, and he longed to remain in his presence. Sometimes true faith is shown not by what we receive, but by the dedication we give, even when nothing more is promised. In Jerusalem, Obed-Edom served faithfully as a gatekeeper and musician in the temple. Humble roles that were significant to him because they allowed him to stay close to God. Despite the many responsibilities, he embraced each one, finding joy in his service. His story reminds us that devotion isn't about grandeur or recognition. Instead, it's often about quiet acts of faith and commitment that stem from a heart truly connected to God. How often do we too find meaning in simple acts of devotion that keep us grounded in faith? This commitment to God's service became a family legacy for Obed-Edom. His children and grandchildren went on to serve faithfully in the temple as well, passing down the devotion that had been ignited in their hearts. Obed-Edom's choice didn't just impact his own life, it planted seeds of faith that grew across generations. We, too, can think about the legacy our faith will leave, knowing that every act of love and service can inspire those who follow us. In a world that often values status, Obed-Edom found fulfillment in simply being near God, offering his life as an act of worship. Each day, he chose to show up, to serve, and to worship. His dedication teaches us that true devotion doesn't always make headline. Sometimes it's the quiet, consistent acts of faith that speak the loudest to God. Isn't it beautiful to think that every act of service, no matter how small, is seen and valued by him? Obed-Edom's faith journey didn't end with the blessings he received at home. It continued in his daily life, in the way he served and loved God with all his heart. His story is a reminder that devotion isn't confined to special moments or blessings. It's a lifelong commitment to walk with God, to serve him in joy, and to remain faithful even in the ordinary routines of life. As we continue, we'll see that this faith-filled legacy became a foundation for his family's future. Obed-Edom's devotion wasn't just for his time, it set an example for all who came after him. May we, like him, find joy in devotion, knowing that our faith and commitment can be a light for generations to come. Obed-Edom's legacy didn't end with his own faithfulness. It was carried forward by his children and grandchildren, a testament to the power of a life devoted to God. His story became a foundation of faith for his family, inspiring them to serve God with the same dedication he had shown. Through his example, Obed-Edom passed down not only a history of blessings, but a model of faith that encouraged his descendants to live for something greater than themselves. How often do we think about the legacy we're leaving behind and what future generations might remember about our faith? The Bible tells us that Obed-Edom's descendants continued to serve as gatekeepers and musicians in the temple, filling roles that required devotion and humility. They didn't serve for recognition or praise. They served out of love for God, just as their father and grandfather had done. This devotion became a defining trait of their family, a light that continued to shine long after Obed-Edom's time. His family's commitment reminds us that our choices today shape the faith and values of those who come after us. Obed-Edom's legacy speaks to the impact of a faithful heart. He wasn't a king or a warrior, he was a humble servant who loved God deeply, and that love became a lasting heritage, showing that anyone, regardless of status, can leave a legacy of faith. In a world that often values success by outward achievements, Obed-Edom's life reminds us that the greatest legacy we can leave is one of love and faithfulness. How encouraging it is to know that God values our dedication, even in the smallest acts of devotion. As his family continued to serve in the temple, they carried with them the memory of God's blessings and the importance of his presence. Each generation saw their roles as not just duties, but as acts of worship, a chance to honor the God who had been so faithful to their family. This attitude became a hallmark of Obed-Edom's descendants, showing that a life rooted in faith can inspire generations. What values and beliefs are we instilling in our own families, and how might they impact the future? In honoring Obed-Edom's legacy, we see that faith isn't just for ourselves. It's a gift that can be passed down, creating a ripple effect that reaches far beyond our own lives. His story encourages us to live with an eternal perspective, knowing that every moment of devotion, every act of kindness, and every prayer can sow seeds of faith in those who come after us. As we approach the end of Obed-Edom's story, we realize that his life was a testament to God's love and grace, a legacy that honored the one who had blessed him so richly. And so, we too are invited to consider the legacy we're creating, a legacy that reflects God's love and inspires others to draw closer to him. Obed-Edom's story holds timeless lessons that reach across centuries to speak into our lives today. His journey reminds us that faith isn't about having all the answers or living without fear. It's about a willingness to open our hearts to God's presence, trusting that he will guide and bless us. When Obed-Edom welcomed the ark into his home, he embraced the unknown, showing us that sometimes faith requires stepping out, even when we don't know what lies ahead. How often do we let the fear of the unknown hold us back from experiencing God's blessings? One of the most powerful lessons from Obed-Edom's life is the importance of living with an open and welcoming heart. He didn't need wealth or status to invite God's presence. He only needed a heart ready to say yes. This reminds us that we don't have to be perfect or have our lives all together to experience God's blessings. God is looking for hearts that are willing, just as Obed-Edom's was. Are there areas in your own life where God is inviting you to open your heart, trusting that he has blessings in store? Obed-Edom's story also teaches us about the blessings that come with faithfulness. His decision to welcome the ark led to an overflow of blessings that impacted his family and community. This shows us that when we live in alignment with God's will, his blessings often extend beyond us, touching the lives of those around us. Just as Obed-Edom's family and even his community witnessed God's favor, our faithfulness can be a light, inspiring and encouraging others in ways we might never fully see. In his devotion, Obed-Edom reminds us of the joy found in serving God wholeheartedly. Even after the ark left his home, he continued to serve in the temple, finding fulfillment in simply being close to God. This challenges us to seek joy not in external rewards, but in the act of devotion itself. When we serve out of love for God, rather than for recognition, our faith deepens and our lives become richer. Are there ways in your life where you could embrace this joy, finding peace in the simplicity of devotion? Another lesson we take from Obed-Edom's life is the legacy of faith he left for future generations. His children and grandchildren followed in his footsteps, serving in the temple with the same dedication. This reminds us that the choices we make today shape the spiritual heritage we pass on. Just as Obed-Edom's faith impacted his family for generations, our faith can leave a lasting legacy, planting seeds of hope and devotion in those who come after us. As we prepare to conclude his story, Obed-Edom's life stands as a beautiful example of what it means to live a life centered around God. His story encourages us to welcome God into every part of our lives, to trust him with our fears, and to serve him with joy and dedication. May we, like Obed-Edom, open our hearts fully to God, knowing that his presence brings blessings beyond what we can imagine. Obed-Edom's story invites each of us to reflect on how we welcome God into our own lives. We may not have the Ark of the Covenant resting in our living rooms, but we do have opportunities each day to invite God's presence into our hearts and homes. Just like Obed-Edom, we can create a place for God by being open, willing, and ready to receive Him. How often do we start our day with a simple prayer, welcoming God's presence and asking Him to guide us? One of the most powerful ways we can embrace God's presence is by finding Him in the ordinary moments. For Obed-Edom, each day with the ark was a reminder of God's closeness, not because of grand rituals, but because of a quiet, humble faith. We too can find God in our daily routines, whether it's in a kind word, a moment of gratitude, or a quiet prayer. Sometimes it's the small acts of devotion that bring us closest to Him. How can you make space for God in the everyday moments of your life? Embracing God's presence also means trusting Him with our fears, just as Obed-Edom did when he accepted the ark. We all have areas in our lives that bring uncertainty, moments when we feel out of control. But when we invite God into these spaces, we find strength and courage. Obed-Edom's story shows us that true peace comes not from avoiding challenges, but from knowing that God is with us, guiding us through. What areas of your life do you need to entrust to God's care today? Living in God's presence brings an overflow of blessings, not always in material ways, but in the peace, joy, and purpose that fill our lives. Just as Obed-Edom's family was blessed, we too experience God's goodness when we stay close to Him. These blessings often extend beyond us, touching our loved ones and our communities. When we live in faith, our lives become a testament to God's love, inspiring others to seek Him as well. Obed-Edom's story encourages us to be consistent in our devotion, not just when life is easy, but even when things are uncertain. It reminds us that God's presence isn't confined to special events or religious gatherings. It's something we can experience every day. As we walk with Him, we grow in faith, love, and purpose, becoming more attuned to His guidance. Are there ways you can deepen your daily connection with God, making each day a reflection of His presence? In the end, Obed-Edom's life reminds us that embracing God's presence is a lifelong journey, one that brings blessings, courage, and joy beyond measure. May we, like him, open our hearts each day, welcoming God with a spirit of gratitude and devotion. And as we do, may we find that His presence truly transforms our lives in ways we never imagined. As we reach the end of Obed-Edom's story, we're reminded of the profound impact that welcoming God can have on our lives. Through his simple act of faith, Obed-Edom and his family experienced blessings beyond measure, blessings that extended for generations. His journey teaches us that God's presence transforms us from within, filling our lives with peace, courage, and joy. And just as it was for Obed-Edom, the invitation to welcome God is open to each of us today, whether in times of certainty or uncertainty. Let us take these lessons to heart, carrying them into our own lives as we seek to welcome God's presence more fully each day. May we trust in His blessings, even when we can't see the full picture, and find peace in His unwavering love. Let's close with a prayer. Lord, thank you for the example of Obed-Edom and the reminder that your presence is a source of true blessing. Help us to open our hearts to you, to trust you with every part of our lives, and to carry your light into the world around us. May our lives be a testimony of your love, and may your blessings overflow to all who are touched by our faith. Amen. If this has encouraged you, I invite you to share this message with friends and family who may need it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can continue this journey of faith with us. May God's blessings be with you always.